Oh, he's a parasite, pervy man in or out of sight. Everyone thinks he's just a fright. Day or night he's putting up a show. Calls himself Juno, when really he's James. And India's Jonathan. Susie, that's just Eddie. And Gigi's definitely George. Jane is John. Monroe's Ian, carrying on. Rixie, Rachel, or Paris, we'll just call them Dave. But they're all parasites, devouring women's rights, claiming them for their own. Oh, the parasitic man. Oh, he's a parasite.
Hi, hello, how the devil are you? My name is Kelly J. Keane, and I thought I'd give you a little update on my feelings about Laurence Fox. And shall we see why I've got feelings about Laurence Fox today of all days? Well, let's have a look.
Good evening. Ever since the pandemic, or whatever they call it, started, and they were talking about, that lovely reform candidate, Nadeem Zahawi, talked about Gillick competence with children, about them receiving medical treatment in schools. Schools are schools, not hospitals, by the way. Just so you know, schools, you're not a hospital. We don't come to you for medical treatment. I made it very clear to my children's schools that I did not consent for them to be experimented on with the COVID vaccine.
Right. Whatever your views on the COVID vaccine, and let me be perfectly transparent here, I had them because I had to go to the United States of America. I mean, did I have to under the threat of death? No. But I did it. I might even regret that, but that's the only reason I did it. My children didn't have the vaccine. I also have not consented to the HPV or the flu vaccines because I've got healthy children with no underlying medical issues. So that is not the issue of this, whether or not you agree with vaccines. The issue that Lawrence is talking about is consent.
Which is, I think we're all working out now that was a good call. But, those of you that still love it, you keep loving it. And we'll see how that works out for you in the end. So I wrote very clearly to the school to say, I do not consent for any medical interventions other than, emergency ones to be administered to my children at school. I don't, it's a choice for the parents or hospital. So they have on record me saying that, the school, right? This is why I fucking hate schools. And if I could, but I can't for reasons which are fairly obvious, I would take my kids out of school tomorrow. I think schools are absolutely evil. I turn up today to go and pick up my son and watch him play football and stuff. And his football coach comes over to me and he says he's been really ill. He's got like this terrible nosebleed and he's had a horrible nosebleed all day and he doesn't feel right and he's off balance. And I'm like, is he all right? What's happened? And they're like, he said he's had some injection. So some fucker at this school, and I tell you, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I really am absolutely beyond enraged. I say to my son, but you know that we don't do these ridiculous jabs. I don't know which one it is. Someone will probably tell me it might be HPV. Who knows which one that they've decided to chuck in his arm, despite me saying, no, please don't.
So again, this is not about whether or not you agree or disagree with vaccines or whether or not you, Lawrence has stated in other videos that he's not anti-vaccine. He's just anti some vaccines and doesn't see the necessity of them. And I'm inclined to agree with him. That's sort of my position. Unless it's unless it's necessary, I don't think we should be giving children vaccines. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But again, this is about consent. So he has told the school clearly that he does not consent to his children having anything other than completely essential, like emergency medication. Um, it's just so the mad thing about this is I couldn't say to a school, I consent to you giving my child cocodamol, for example. Or I think you can do I th- I think you can do paracetamol, but I'm not 100% sure they can give paracetamol um or ibuprofen. So anyway, I'll let him carry on.
So he's been jabbed today. He's had a huge nosebleed. He looks like he's lost half a stone. Looks really fucking ill, if I'm honest. And they did it anyway. That is modern schooling. It's absolutely fucking disgusting that they would do that against the parents' wishes. We have seen what this stuff does to people. Stop jabbing healthy children. Final point, because it is my final point, because I want to actually just have a nice evening now and not want to go down round to the school and start picketing it or whatever. So I say, so we've had this conversation, obviously. I've had this conversation with my son. I said, don't let them jab you with stuff at school. It's not what happens. He said, they tried to call you. And I said, did they? And he said, yeah. My French teacher tried to call you to get your consent for me to have it done. And I was like, no, she didn't. So he said, I saw her pick up the phone and try and call you. I have no record of her calling me on the phone. So you can take that for however sinister that is. I'm really, really sorry. Schools are places where children should learn to read and write. They're not places where governments can fulfill their obligations, their medical contract obligations to Pfizer or whichever stupid fucking pharmaceutical company you want to poison your children with next. That is not the place at the school. And I want a political party in this country that will actually be brave enough to say this shit. Teach our children. Don't jab our children. Nadeem Zahawi, don't think we don't remember. We remember, man. And now I've got a kid who's not very well. Despite me saying I do not consent. Where is the parent in 2026 in modern Britain? Where do we fit in? I am absolutely fucking livid.
Right. Well, I can't blame him at all. I would be frankly livid if I were Laurence. Look, as I do have a political party, it's called Party of Women, and one of our policies is about returning parental responsibility to parents and taking it back from schools. Now, over the years, I've had many conversations and been, Rosie Duffield, I think she and Lloyd Russell Moyles, they both decided to publicly criticize me about me questioning Gillick. And I think Rosie Duffield used it as an excuse to sort of pretend in a friendly way. This was actually when Rosie was public, because you will remember that Rosie was quiet for a number of years when she knew what was going on and she didn't have the balls. She had the £90,000 salary, but she didn't have the balls to actually say anything. She didn't have the courage to attend the meeting that Standing for Women did in the House of Lords called First Do No Harm in 2021. Somebody unironically called her a leading light. Absolute madness. £90,000 a year. I'm sorry, but it is your job to represent 50% of your constituents who are adversely affected by the inclusion of men into women's spaces. The mind boggles. The mind boggles. It's like the expectation is so low of MPs in this country that even when one is silent for years and then says something meek with about as much charisma as this empty can of Diet Coke. And everyone acts like it's the most courageous thing ever. The most courageous thing Rosie Duffield did, as far as I'm concerned, is she got attacked. I don't think actually she was a participant, but anyway, I digress. It is just it's very annoying that now MPs are coming out and saying, oh yeah, let's not experiment on children. Well, where the fuck were you for the last 10 years? 10 years we've known about this. Anyway, right, I'm talking about schools. Let me just stick to that topic. So I have been into schools with parents. I have followed the case that went to High Court where schools lie to parents. I have been in schools myself and heard teachers talk like social justice warriors. I mean, I'm sure we all have. I'm certainly not the only person. We've all seen that. We've all seen teachers think that they know better than you about your children. We've seen teachers. In 2015, teachers stopped using the words girl and boy. We've seen the social engineering of fucking really shadowy figures, because it's not the government that you elect, it's the civil servants behind the scenes that come up with all these fucking policies about allowing men in dresses to come and teach your children. It's the shadowy element of our government, the people behind the government, the NGOs, the fucking money that trickles into these groups. That's who's deciding that your children at school are eating halal, whether you like it or not. That's the people. That's a shadowy little element of people behind the government that are deciding that the safeguarding lead of schools can lie to you. Like, how is it? What is ultimately the mechanism that meant that your children are not seen as an extension of you when they get to school? They are seen as individuals, and sometimes you are just an inconvenience between what the school knows it should be doing and what you might not say yes to. And I don't know how we got here. I can imagine it's NGOs, it's lots of money, it's think tanks, and it's people with an awful lot of money and influence who are sowing these seeds everywhere. And then all of a sudden, that seed of, well, children should have autonomy because not all parents are good. That's the seed. Gillick competence, Fraser, I can't remember what it's called. But there is something, let me have a look. It's not Fraser competence, Fraser guidelines. Do apologize. So the Gillick competence was introduced in 1985, and it allowed exception to parental consent in medical treatment, and it was for the very specific competence of birth control. And that's probably because we were in a time where there were a lot of teenage pregnancies in the 1980s. And so it wasn't supposed to ever replace parents as decision makers, establish child autonomy over parents, justify secrecy as standard practice. It wasn't ever supposed to apply to identity, education, belief systems, or long-term medical pathways. It was never intended as that. And the mission creep of both Fraser guidelines and Gillick competency, I just think it was a Gillick, the Gillick competency was a moment in time where we changed the relationship that children have with parents. Now, what we're looking at now is that children are supposed to be okay in deciding whether or not they have the fucking COVID vaccine. We are in a situation right now where children, it is decided that children can decide with or without their parents' consent that they are the opposite sex, and a school will facilitate that. A school will change their name. A school will change their pronouns. A school will enable that child to go into the opposite sex changing rooms, all behind a parent's back. Now, I don't know without Gillick whether or not we'd be doing that. I think people sort of have used Gillick and Fraser, and then they've extrapolated that and pulled it into a situation where the child is a person without their family who can make decisions. this is the same as I think it was a couple of years ago. Someone said when their child turned 12 or 13, they got an email from the doctors or a letter from the doctor's surgery asking if they still wanted to include their parents in any of their medical decisions or medical appointments with the doctor. So we are in a very dangerous time. I really hope that Lawrence, because he does have the financial freedom, which wealth creates, to sue that school, because I was looking into whether or not it's illegal, and it doesn't appear to be completely illegal, but it cannot be right. What would happen if after that vaccination that he did not consent to, what would happen if that child had something that was like some sort of vaccine injury, which does happen, whether you agree with vaccines or not? You have to admit that sometimes there might be an underlying issue, but sometimes there are vaccine injuries that profoundly impact somebody's life. What happens if that happened to that boy? And Lawrence has then got to look after that child. Maybe it incurs loads and loads of costs. Maybe let's take it away from Lawrence. Maybe somebody has a child at school who gets who has a heart attack on the basis of flu jab. Like, are the school gonna who's gonna look after that child? Can we sue the school? Because as far as I'm concerned, I make decisions about my children, and that includes schools deciding that they can teach my children morality. I expect a school to teach manners. I expect a school to take care of bullies. I expect a school to ensure that children feel safe with rigid discipline in the classroom. But what I do not expect is that schools think that they know better than me about the vaccine um, routine of my children, about certain medical decisions. I mean, I said no to the HPV. I think I got calls from the school. I got more calls from the school about my daughter and sons having the HPV vaccine than any contact during the whole of the lockdown from any school. Like that just what is it? Are schools getting some sort of financial compensation? Are teachers so thick these days and so easily influenced that someone just has to come into school with some sort of, hey, this is really great for kids, we should all be doing it, and then the school somehow feel like they're moral authority over our children? Look, what we have done at Party of Women, um, I'm going to read you the outlines of our policies. So we stand for justice. We believe the justice system should be um, equal completely. We don't think that the police should be able to police your speech. We believe that we should repeal the GRA, repeal the Equality Act 2010, withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. We believe that we should be examining migration and the safety of women and girls, and the safety of women and girls should decide policy, and whether or not these men are allowed in the country, which they shouldn't be. And the policy should be to get rid of them because they make this country less safe for women and girls. I'm not saying that there isn't sexual violence already in this country or harassment. I'm not saying that we don't have a huge problem with pornography, and sexual boundaries, and what our children see on their screens. I'm not saying that any of those things don't exist. I'm saying that they already exist. We've got enough of a battle without importing more. Justice for grooming gang victims, support for mothers and young children. I want to see us really examine what it is to be a mother in this country. And I really want to get rid of the idea that if you have a decent job and you have an expensive mortgage, that your only option is to put your children, your babies, your non-verbal babies into daycare. Parental rights and responsibilities. So I want to see a return to family first. That the school thinks your family unit is more important than what the school thinks is right to tell your child. So, in all matters of consent, until your child is 16, I believe that you should be involved in every decision where consent is necessary. So, a child cannot consent to medical treatments. Obviously, if it's life or death, then somebody else can consent. But a vaccine is not life or death. The problem with Gillick competence, I think we should re-examine that. I think we should reform or repeal the whole Gillick competence and the Fraser guidelines when it comes to anything to do with medic. I don't think that there should be vaccine programs at schools. I think we should return vaccines to back into the health centres. So I've said about that. Mission creep when it comes to Fraser and Gillick. I think we should just take it all back. Ending secrecy and restoring safeguarding, freedom from religious coercion. So that would be ban the niqab, restoring public institutions, ending ideological capture, whether it's Islam, whether it's trans nonsense, whether it's critical race theory. I don't want any like words like decolonization. I don't think any of those things have a place in our police, in our councils, in our NHS, in our education system. I just want to see these ideologies just stripped back. They are not shared beliefs at all. Ban on cousin marriage, and that would be a desire to protect women and children. I believe that first cousin marriage should be banned as a matter of urgency in the United Kingdom. But just on these ideas that your children, you should know about this. You should be looking at schools. So schools aren't going to indoctrinate your children just on the trans shit. They are also going to be teaching them about Islam. They're also going to be, there's primary schools that go and spend days in the mosque and little girls put hijabs on, for fuck's sake. I think that critical race theory is coming in all the schools. So you need to know what your children are learning in school, and the school have a legal duty to let you know. So crack on. I just thought I'd share all those things with you. Look, if you can speak up and say the unsayable and ask the right questions, then I promise we will win. If you can go into school, look them in the eye, and find out what it is they're teaching your children, then I promise we will win. And do you know why else we're going to win? Well, because I never lose.
Oh, he's a parasite, pervy man in or out of sight. Everyone thinks he's just a fright. Day or night he's putting up a show. Calls himself Juno, when really he's James. And India's Jonathan. Susie, that's just Eddie. And Gigi's definitely George. Jane is John. Monroe's Ian, carrying on. Rixie, Rachel, or Paris, we'll just call them Dave. But they're all parasites, devouring women's rights, claiming them for their own. Oh, the